Morning. I was going to ask if you can hear me, but I think it's pretty loud, right? We're good? Okay, really good. It is so cool to be here. Thank you, Brandon, for the invitation. I love this venue. I love this city. This is my first time here. So to all of you that live here, thank you for sharing your beautiful city. I couldn't think of a better, more beautiful place to be than to talk about beautiful things like design. You know, first of all, as Brandon mentioned, I am first and foremost a designer. I get these fancy awards and this cool title and everything, but I just really enjoy design. I am really one of these individuals. I'm so lucky to have my profession so merged with my passion. It's just design is really so merged into my life. Every single thing that I do takes on kind of a design way of thinking, whether I pick up a guitar, pick up a paintbrush to paint, or go to work and solve pretty intractable problems. And I just think it's a wonderful time to be a designer. I'm hoping that all of you share that. Today I'm going to share a lot of interesting things with you. I'm going to, at times, go fast. But I wanted to have a lot of visuals in this presentation because a lot of you are designers, right? I'm going to guess at least half of you, maybe more. Am I right? That's what I want to hear, so whooping. I don't like to read things, but just as a guide to keep me on pace because I do have serious jet lag right now, and my coffee is half full, and that's about my consciousness level. So, the topic, when Brandon sent me the topic last year, design-fueled innovation, I thought, well, that's really what we're all about. That's what I believe in. And then I started thinking more about design-fueled prosperity and asking myself, what does that even mean? And it became even more and more internalized with me. I started to really take this topic on because I'm like, yeah, we need to talk more about this. I think I wanted to start with kind of the recognition that the real notion, the beginning of our profession, especially industrial design, happened way back at the turn of the century. This is almost 100 years ago. Think back 100 years ago. Being a right-brain designer type, walking into a corporation. Imagine Raymond Loewy. Now, he was a big ego, but when he walked into a room and started talking about art and form and curves, and by the way, we're going to make money if you let us do these things. All the while, a lot of the economists of the time, especially in the early part of the 1920s, were really coming up with theories and formulae on how to make sure that they would become prosperous as a company. These designers were going against this. They were completely going against the grain. Henry Dreyfuss came along. He started talking nonsense to these corporations. It ended up, they proved pretty quick that it was a means of becoming prosperous. So likewise, that is me and my wife, so I've known her a long time. This is me right after design school, coming out of design school, a very arty kid, very much like ready to tear up the world. Did I care about business? No, honestly. I love design. I knew that I could touch people with design ideas. Didn't know exactly how yet. But I did want to find out, so I sought out how to take this kind of right brain thinking, and which I still strongly believe in, but I wanted to learn from the best, so I went to this company called Henry Dreyfuss Associates. Many of you know this company. They were known for especially creating processes and methodologies that led to success. They worked with companies like Polaroid and AT&T and John Deere. They created this mathematical, anthropometric data for the human body, and sure enough, it worked. They made prosperous solutions for clients for decades. But to me, there was something missing. There was, I guess, a gut or an emotion, something that I felt was missing, especially in how I viewed design. So I went to Frog Design in '89, and right away I felt that, at least for me personally, there was much more of a merge in thinking. This sort of emotional quality, this visceral, this magic. We used words like magic and excitement, and we reveled not only in the process, but in that solution. We were fearless. And throughout the 90s, we came up with this form follows emotion thing, and everybody thought that was so cool, and we kind of set it off the cuff. This type of approach was very appealing as far as, especially in regards to prosperity, to CEOs like Steve Jobs and Rupert Murdoch and Larry Ellison and Li Kai-sheng. It seemed like all of these, the big leaders, the real CEOs, understood this. They knew there was something missing in their businesses. And they felt that if we could appeal emotionally to that end user in a much more salient way, that there could be success, prosperity. We certainly proved that point. We burned a lot of bridges, though, in the meantime. Actually, with people like John Scully and folks at Sony, because it was kind of a take no prisoners approach and philosophy at Frog. I loved it, and it was fun, but I really did learn that you must have reciprocity to create success. The kind of reciprocity I'm talking about is like when a client will ask us for a particular solution, we must gain an understanding and start to pull information in and out of one another. So this back and forth kind of consinity that we were seeking was, to me, a metaphor for what a whipsaw is, which is a long two-man saw. There's a handle on each side. So I named the company Whipsaw, left Frog Design, and this is our 15th year of business. And I'm still having a blast. I still feel like that kid that I just showed you a picture of with the long hair, and still a little renegade kid with big dreams in his eyes. I still very much wake up every day like that, including today. In the meantime, as you work with corporations, in regards to design, and this is why this presentation is called the prosperity paradox, because I see these corporations, our clients especially, that will always give us so many constraints. You can't do this, you can't do that. Our objective of success is to do this. And it's often very different than these idealistic principles that we have as designers. I'm sure all of us have felt this. Oftentimes, these corporations don't always want to take a risk. It's safer to be conventional. They really don't want to accept the sustainability kind of philosophy or strategy. Design thinking is still a pretty big concept to many of these corporations. So, really thought about that right there. On the left, you see these client aims. On the right, you see designer aims. We all want the same thing, but as a corporation, we'll say we want increased income for corporation. We are constantly saying, like all of us in this room, we want increased outcome for the user. What does that mean, increased outcome? All forms of outcome for the end user. Make it better looking, make it more usable, make it more understandable, make it more relevant, etc. When they're asking, our corporations and clients are constantly wanting these revenues, money, 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 and everyone on our design team, and I'm guessing everybody in this room, is saying meaning, meaning, meaning. We need to get to prosperity, but the definition of prosperity to a designer is often very different, even opposite. That's why it's a paradox. Increased brand awareness compared to increased personal and social awareness. This is what we want so badly as individuals, to create personal awareness with all of the objects in our world, all of the experiences in our world. You want to feel together, you want your own personal identity, and you want to feel like you're a part of a social group. As the discussions are occurring here, this is social awareness. Obviously, time to market is becoming just insane. I got a note 15 minutes ago from Google that said they need a design in 2 weeks. And I'm like, okay, I'm in Australia, okay, I'll start thinking about it, but I would much rather just do it right. And we all need to continue to push, like, doing things right, for crying out loud. Growth of corporate value, we hear that a lot. And growth of cultural value is something that we should all be concerned with. That's another form of prosperity. To me, it's really, this is what we're experiencing out here. This is growth of cultural value. The fact that we're here, we're in this environment, in this venue, in this environment, in this country, in this part of the world, that's cultural value. That's something really special. And we're trying to create meaningful experiences throughout your life. You just want to feel like you are a human being on this planet, and cultural value is so much a part of that. Finally, I find that as part of this prosperity paradox, like a client's aim of being kind of safe or conventional is we often resist that. We're troublemakers. I'm hoping that a lot of you guys are troublemakers too. Because we're always wanting something more original, something different. So I think we just kind of talked about many of those. I'm going to jump through this. So then, how do our clients, I'm talking about a lot of corporations, create prosperity? They all have different techniques. That's a very common kind of prosperity growth chart on the left that many of you have seen before. But in general, corporations will make a plan and they stick to it. That's important, they stick to it, because a lot of times design is like, no, you shouldn't stick to that, you gotta go over here. That failed. Be iterative. Applying formulas and proven metrics. I can't tell you how many times you all face this too. I mean, you just so often want to tell a client, hey, we know that worked for you last year. You need to go to a different place. Oftentimes they'll hire lots of good people and manifest a plan. They utilize good OEM and ODM capabilities. They cultivate business with great marketing and then finally cut costs. That's the way they do it. This is the way we do it. And I really thought about this list on the right side. There's some weird things in here, and I'll explain each one of them and then give a case study for each one as well. And I'm guessing that a lot of you already sense these things or feel these things or already do these kinds of things. So bear with me as I go through a lot of work. And I'm going to read these because I really want to make a few of these points. The reason I made this list is to really emphasize there is a way to create prosperity with your clients if you are really passionate and really committed to these kinds of principles. We're all going to say it a little bit different, perhaps. This first one is a little controversial. Now, nobody believes more in design thinking than myself. But if I have to open up my email another time and see that you can get a degree in design thinking online in 1 hour, I've been working at this for 30-some years. Design thinking is hard stuff. And we're looking at a lot of portfolios, but where's the seeing, people? It's like, oh my gosh, nobody can draw, nobody can make models, nobody can do renders. You ask the computer, press the button, boop, it's going to render it for me. So that's why I talk about the importance of seeing. And I can just tell you from personal experience, that is my muse. This is the source. When you can actually just internalize and be with a problem and feel it, just really feel it, that is another form of seeing. Because seeing really is so much more than to just visualize. It's really to understand and to empathize. And I love just looking at a problem without being analytical and try thinking with your eyes. It's a strange thing to do. But as soon as you start processing and analyzing, just let it go. And this has led to a lot. We try to employ all these principles which lead to prosperity. And I'm going to go through one project that is a good example of that. We've done about 40 products for this company called Eton. They make emergency products for cases like this, when individuals are really nervous about what might have just happened, a tornado, a flood, a hurricane, etc. We sat down, literally almost blindfolded ourselves, and we didn't have many discussions other than, what does it feel like to be afraid? How can you draw and symbolize fear? And we started to draw like a lot of like capsuled forms, as if you were being protected in some kind of cocoon, or maybe like an automobile, like an SUV, some people said. And we created these, just a notion about the way a product should feel if it's going to address a problem in the case of an emergency. And all of these Eton products are very successful. They've made a lot of money doing these things. But they're all because something is connecting here on a visual level, on a personal level, about what safety or mitigation of fear should look like. Everything is exquisitely detailed. It's a lot of work to get this client to commit to the quality and this client to commit to an OEM that knows how to make these products right. But there's rubber and there's plastic and there's aluminum and there's stainless steel. They're extraordinary. And they basically are designed to bring content, some kind of information to end users. Yes, they are objects, but they're really intended to provide safety in the form of information or power, self-generated power. Here's like a line that's specifically designed for roadside emergencies. We then started talking to them, it's like, wow, sound systems, the sun, wouldn't it be nice if we could have the sun make music? Because isn't light kind of like music? It ebbs, it flows. Today it happens to be playing rock and roll. Tonight it's going to be a symphonic orchestra. By combining these two very different types of energy, we create a whole line of solar-based music players for Eton, and now they're one of the leaders in the industry. So basically, you never plug it in, you just stick it outside and it starts playing music. We started thinking, well, wait a minute, all these great technologies with the dynamo that we create on the radios, wouldn't it be great if we could supply a power source for developing worlds? And this is now a little aluminum box, tiny. It has a 4,000 milliamp battery in it. If you think about, there are 2 billion smartphones in the world. In the next 24 hours, they will all die. But only about half of us have readily access to the grid to plug it in. This, you just crank, 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 crank. It's good exercise. And you can send a text or an email. They've done very well with that. Here's another one of our points that lead to prosperity. Don't let the technology overwhelm the content. And yes, technology is exciting. Believe me, we're in the Silicon Valley, and we get to see some crazy stuff, just really magical things. And there's not a day that goes by, or at least a week that goes by, when someone doesn't mention something to us about some capability that technology is offering, and we get excited. We just get really excited. The real story, though, the real content, and the important thing to remember is the content is the human story. And the technology really has to get in the back seat. It's got to be the drive. It's rear-wheel drive. Most good technology products should be rear-wheel driven. But the human is the one looking forward. You have to constantly think about that human being. And I like to think that a solution should be a byproduct of necessity, feeling, and purpose. Here's a really good example of that, how you take technology. So some of you are taking notes right now. We work with a company called LiveScribe, and they produce a pen that when you write, it's actually recording what you're writing and writing instantly on your iPhone or your iPad. Your scribbled note will show up, but then when you flick it, it goes to the other side and it's already digitized for you. You can then press on that note at any time, and you would be able to hear, for example, this lecture. You'd be able to hear me speaking. Now, we didn't want that thing to look like some clunky, techie gadget that it is, quite frankly. We wanted it to be like a premium pen. We wanted it to look sort of old world, welcoming, beautiful, and timeless. What you see there is actually a turning wheel in the center that turns the computer on, which withdraws the cartridge in the front. The bottom view here shows how complex devices like this commonly are. It's loaded with technology. It's just a wonderful product. On the back, there's a little touch nub. There's a camera in the front, so as you are writing, it's actually looking at a micro dot pattern on the paper. So when you go back to that paper at any time in the future, tap on it, it plays what was being recorded at the time of writing. It's magic. We're living in the future right now. It's happening.
The LiveScribe 3 Smart Pen
This explains
turns
how
your
this thing
words
works.
into action. Your handwritten notes instantly appear on your tablet or smartphone. Once on your device, it's easy to convert your handwriting into text and send it to your friends or colleagues. Your tablet or smartphone can record audio as you write to capture the things you don't.
Hi, this is Mr. Green. I'm calling to confirm my reservation on April 18th.
Certainly, I have you down for 2 people at 7:30 p.m.
And your address is 252 California Street in San Francisco, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Your notes become more useful when they appear in your favorite apps.
They're doing very well with this thing. And it's another example of just taking Well, I guess forcing that technology into that back seat and then watch what happens on the market. People just like it, and they're responding to it because it feels very personal to them.
The live
Oop.
scribe.
Let's jump ahead there. Am I stuck, Andrew? This is another really interesting project. Technology is getting tinier and tinier, and as you know, we all have to deal with these kind of devices every single day to control data. All types of content, whether you're typing, whether you're gaming, whether you're entertaining, what have you. We started working with this company called Nod Labs. Did you guys see this introduced? It was on front page Google News. It was hot about 3 weeks ago when it was announced. Okay, in the Bay Area, when something like this gets announced, everybody's like, oh my God, Nod Labs, it's really neat. This is a wearable device, but it's very small. It's a ring. And a lot of times our projects start out something very simple like this, but then we're also engineering the designs that we do, so we have to figure out how to actually compact all this technology into a very small form factor. You can see a battery floating above an FPC, a flexible circuit that runs all the way around it with circuits in it. Here's some of the early designs of the ring itself, and you can see it has a stainless steel core, which has, they're removable, so the different diameters. There's 12 different sizes to fit any finger. And the ring recharges in a case that looks like a ring case should. It looks like that. So there's a touch surface on it, and there's 4 switches. It has a form of kind of like a traditional teacup because it's actually worn on your fingers, and the adjacent fingers help to control it and prevent it from slipping around and rolling around your finger because you're just touching it like this. Pretty neat, and it's probably a harbinger of things to come. Within a few years, we'll all be having little devices like this, whether they're rings or fuel band type products, which we also did. Here's another one of these points that lead to prosperity. This one is so much at the center of my heart, I can't explain this one enough. I always liked, when I saw this Chinese proverb, if the wind doesn't blow, the grass doesn't stir, a long time ago, and I thought, man, that is the perfect design maxim. If you really think about it. She's laughing. It's true. And of course, when you accept that, you really must be preposterously curious. It's like audacious and preposterous. I like these words because I don't believe you can say enough about being creative. And it takes a bloody force field to prevent your client from throwing water on this idea. You have to be very strong. I find that as being a consultant, only a consultant my whole career, I found you just cannot let a client get you down. Just stay creative, and usually creativity will find its way. We just simply don't accept words like impossible, irresolvable, or impractical. It's just not part of our vocabulary, even if we know it's true. We're not going to say it, because already that just takes the spirit out of it. And again, like I said before, creativity is not something that you do sometimes. Some of our clients think, okay, let's all get together and we're going to be creative. It doesn't work that way. I have weird dreams at 4 o'clock in the morning, and it's like, man, where was that dream a week ago when I needed it? And you just never know when it's going to happen. So it's sort of just, you have to respect it. Here's a really good example of that. Here, this is a particular problem. Mothers and babies for a long time struggling with how to get nutrition for the baby. And baby bottles have been designed the same for over 100 years. A bottle, glass bottle, gasket, nipple. The nipple doesn't look at all like mother. And these things get stuck in the dishwasher when you clean them. We said, well, what if it's more breast-shaped? Boy, isn't that kind of a no-brainer? I was talking to you about this last night. Yeah. She designed the, what was the name? NIMBY, yes. MIMBY, right. And it resulted in this product here, which we ended up growing this. We produced a little under 1 million of these, and then we sold it to a company called Water Geeks. They're still producing these, but it was an extraordinary accomplishment because it was the first time that a bottle breathed very naturally. Babies loved it because it was much more natural. They called it the natural nurser. And it came in 3 different colors, and the colors signified the flow rate of the milk. Yeah, really great. Now here's something brand new. I was flying down to Las Vegas of all places, and I kept thinking, I just had this argument with my son. He was going to get on his bike. He's like, yeah, Dad, but when I get to school, my helmet, I don't want to wear the helmet because the helmet is too big. It doesn't fit in a locker. And it was going to rain that day. The one day a year it rained in California. He's like, I'm not going to take my helmet. Well, that's the day you need it the most. That's the problem. It doesn't go anywhere, and you hang it on your bike, and it rains, and they get wet, and they get stolen. So I sketched this thing up, and we worked this up, and we're going to try to get this into production. We'll often do that. We'll actually just come up with an interesting idea and take it to production. So it's called Half Dome for a reason. It splits in half, where the top dome comes off and drops into the bottom dome, which means you can now stack them up. So that's a family of 4. Their bike helmets fit in a bag about this big. It's tiny. And now it's the same thickness as a textbook. And my son saw this, and he was like, oh, now that's what I call a bike helmet. I would take that no matter what. Plus, it's cool looking. And of course, everybody wants cool looking things, right? So, we plan to make these in a bunch of different colors and really have fun with it. I'm finding more and more that people are willing to make products that transform. People like transformative kinds of experiences, and they want to engage in the product. They don't just want it to just sit there like an object. This is another one of our design maxims that always leads to prosperity. At least we try to expose this to our client. Design is very ego-driven, but really to break rules, it really helps to step outside of your own cranial box, if you want to call it that. What seemed so objective before can suddenly reshuffle into a newfound truth. And the wider the perspective, the deeper the concept. I so fully believe that. Here's a really good example of kind of a boring industry. This is a typical label printer. They're big clunky things that sit on desks, mostly in offices, sometimes in homes. And we started a new way of thinking about printing devices like this. And we came up with this thing here, which is very different, and yet so honest in how it is constructed. Because here you see a print cartridge on the left, you see a print head in the middle, and then you see a vertical label cutter, which happens to be the perfect configuration, especially for carrying this thing around. It's the first wireless label printer. This thing just came out in Germany. It's now like flying off the shelves. I can't believe it. It's a label printer. I mean, but it's pretty interesting. My favorite part about it is the cartridge inside. Cartridges are really a drag, as you know, printer cartridges. They're just thrown away. They're not sustainable at all. So we said, what if we created a design where the package, the cartridge, and all of its functionality were all made out of recycled, compostable paper, and that was the shipping package, and that was the structure for the cartridge. It had never been done before. Again, getting out of our heads completely. That is the cartridge. And what makes this so unique is there are 4 different label sizes, widths, and you flip up that bill in the front there that you see, and underneath that is a tiny little 50-cent NVRAM chip. When you drop that in the printer, The NVRAM chip tells the printer, this is how wide I am as a roll. This is how much I have left as far as roll quantity. And then you can take that back out, put that back in 100 years from now, and it will know exactly how many are left in there. It's a no-brainer. You do not need to think as an end user anymore. It's all wireless too, so all of your apps are on your iPhone. So I want this label, boom, Design Forum, Australia, bam. There's 50 labels right there. It's very inexpensive. It's all, you can throw the whole thing away. And I think this is really where packaging needs to go. It's not the prettiest thing in the world. It didn't need to be pretty, but in its utilitarian value and in the value that it proposes, it becomes more beautiful. Uncover the hidden faculty of your subject. This has been one of my personal pet peeves. I always like to find something. I call it a hook. You need to find something within a product, some hidden essence that you can express. It's our job to give it a voice, whatever that might be. We've been working a lot with Cisco, and that led to TP-Link. And when you're a designer and you're like, okay, another router, and there's these boxes with these dipole antennas, I accidentally went like this to Cisco once, and they're like, we can't ever do dual antennas again. I'm like, what? And they said, look what you just did. I'm like, sorry, it just must be symbolic or something. So we said, let's get rid of those and take the existing low-cost antennas that are already inside the box, which are really beautiful. These are polymorphic conformable antennas. Each one of these little bends represents a different wavelength. And we wanted to just expose it. That was the beauty to us. That is revealing the faculty of the subject. That's exactly what I'm talking about. It's not about creating just a pretty object. You got to reveal that inner faculty. It's just like when you meet someone. You want to find out, what are they all about? What makes them tick? Who is this person inside? It's your personality. It's so hard to get that out of corporations, your clients. It's often hard to get that out of products. But when you do, something resonant then happens. It's really wonderful. There's another good example. PCs, that's state of the art. We didn't design that. It's an HP. This small company came to us and said, we have a zero client technology. What does that mean? It means that there's no software, there's no hardware inside the box. Make it a zero client. Zero, what does that even mean? Man, so we're like, let's just distill this down to the absolute nothing that it is, that the technology is. So we created this box. It's literally, this thing is 2 inches high, but it weighs 2 pounds. It's die-cast zinc. We didn't have to put any holes in it because it's its own conductive material, so the heat naturally comes out of this thing. They've sold hundreds of thousands of these things. It's just a magical little zero. They call it a zero client. And we want it to be so zero that everything around it makes it sort of disappear. And through that, the beauty is its austerity, is its nothingness in a way. The fact that it was zero is what made it interesting. But in the back, of course, you need all these little connectors, and there has to be a little overhang for a VGA that fits in there. And because the VGA has a lot of pull factor, this thing weighs 2 pounds, it's die-cast zinc, it's not going anywhere. I love this. This will almost always lead to prosperity. Because solving problems, it's mostly about that end user. And I cannot tell you how many experts I work with, all these different client groups that say, no, you have to do this, and you have to do that, and don't forget about this, and forget about that. We always come back to that end user. It really does. The buck stops at the end user. You have to so internalize it. I like to say that you need to almost completely, personalize it, the way an actor will do, take on a role where they become that person completely. And you really do need to drop your preconceptions about what you think that end user is going to want. That's why you need to become them so much. Here's a really great example. I started this company with 2 other folks to create lunchboxes because we didn't see any innovation at all in lunchboxes. And we thought maybe there's a way to construct this in a really different way. So we have, what you're looking at here is we start with a core piece like this. That's an injection molded plastic part, food grade, recycled plastic. And there are lids that go on both sides. The lids contain customizable faceplates, so the child never tires of their lunchbox. That was the problem. Toy Story comes out, and they love it, and then like 6 months later, then Finding Nemo comes out. It's, oh, Dad, I don't want my Toy Story lunchbox anymore, so you throw it away. Not to mention the food inside gets pretty stinky and you can't clean them. So we actually pay artists royalties. When you go on to getubo.com, we've got a social network of artists that contribute, and then they get paid royalties. And you can go on and look through hundreds of faceplates and just buy those for like $6. So it grows with the child. When a product can grow with the child, so you don't throw that box away, it becomes much more useful. And we just started selling these in Australia as well. It's kind of a little cult item. Here's something kind of like that. Again, listening to the end user, but this is very, very different. This is a very serious surveying market. So if you need to know where you are on the planet down to 1 millimeter, crazy, right? And if you're building a bridge like that out there, you need to know where that footer is exactly, and you can't make any mistakes. It's important. But we really needed to get into the mind of the surveyor. So, then we started a design project. We realized that we could injection mold. We engineered this magnesium case. It was like an I-beam, and eventually tested our assumptions, and then eventually built this waterproof GPS unit that is now the standard of the industry. They took over Trimble. They're now number one. If you want a line of GPS products, we designed all of them for Topcon. And it is now in this very vertical market. But if any of you are surveyors, right now, there's no surveyors in here, are there? If there were, you guys would be wanting my autograph, because this thing is like famous. It's like, wow. But all we did was listen to the end user. We did not impart any of our own opinions on this. It was strictly listening to the end user and crafting a solution around what they were dealing with. And there were hundreds of issues. That led to prosperity. Just that. Find opportunities in new materials and manufacturing techniques. You know this. But man, you have to really believe it. You've got to be willing to do the hard work and the research. This is a project that we had worked on for about 3 years. Nike had invented a fuel band type technology. They had kind of a vision, and they worked with this company called Astro, another design firm, to kind of provide a vision for what a wrist wearable device was that would sort of encourage you to kind of just move, to become more active. But they didn't know how to make it. So they came to us, and we developed the SE, which you see here, and the first fuel band. And this was the result of quite a few people. We had like 5 engineers on this for a few years. There's 40 trips to China represented here. We invented quite a few new processes. And what you see on that far left there is the base first injected part, which is co-molded with a magnesium, those little bars of metal in there, which give it the rigidity that's required. Then we add the USB, then we add the circuit board with 96 little LEDs on there. And then the fourth shot on the right is where we injection mold over the top of everything a clear TPE, a thermoplastic elastomer. It's translucent, so that's why some of you might have one of these fuel bands. It looks like a Livestrong band. It looks like an opaque material, but when you press that button, it lights up from within, and this is where all that magic occurs. That is hard to do. Let me tell you, we burned a lot of tools, we burned out a lot of people, this was tough. And when you're injecting plastic at more than 300 degrees Fahrenheit on the top of all of your electronics and your battery, all the LEDs and everything else, all kinds of weird things happen. Not to mention the velocity as it's going into the tool. So you have to be there right next to that tool maker, feet on the ground in China, no sleep, and be ready to deal with what happens, and be ready to keep trying and trying and trying. So it did work. This thing came out. Talk about prosperity. They have great prosperity with this. There is for some reason, Nike has decided they don't want to get in the hardware business so much anymore. They're happier, I think, in the more core competencies of sport. But I think there's maybe more that meets the eye here with what we know about their decision. They're planning on something, and they're still selling these, and they've sold many millions. And I suspect that this story hasn't played out completely.
Introducing the new Nike Plus Fuel Band SE. The device that earns you Nike Fuel. The universal way to measure all kinds of activity. It tracks your entire day. the intensity of your workouts and displays your progress towards a daily goal. It stays constantly connected to your iOS device so you can stay motivated with move reminders, cheers from friends, and game-like challenges. It's the smart, simple, fun way to get more active.
Okay, so you guys know what that is. I'm going to speed up a little bit here. Some of you might know of DropCam. This is a really cool new product that keeps an eye on valuable things in your home. And we conceived of a very clean, simple package that I think really is, this kind of embodies a lot of the holistic design kind of thinking that we do, where it's, almost inseparably functional and beautiful, all in one, all wrapped up into a harmonious product. That's an aluminum paddle. You can turn and aim and twist that. I'm going to even skip over the video just for the sake of time. It's a really cool product, just you got to believe me. Did that click forward, Andrew? There we go. This is really cool. Finding inspiration in marginally related, non-figurative ideas. I completely believe in this as well. Just looking at abstract notions. When you're designing a toaster, don't just look at the toast, but what does it mean to be hungry? What does it mean to be on a like the hot summer morning? Look at things that really do influence you. We work with this company TP Link, and we designed more than 30 products for them, and they let us use those kinds of abstract notions to help them find prosperity. These are network devices, gateway devices, and we build in all kinds of interesting abstract semantic things about connectivity and about people and communities. That's what that's supposed to mean. And in China, these are just flying off the shelves. They sell more than 3 million of these a month. But they sell more than 3 million of each one of the products that we designed a month. They sold 150 million products that we designed just last year. It's a big market, and they are crazy for design. And these are all in production. These are all out there in the world. China's become like the Wild West of design. They're really letting a firm like us just go crazy, and we can use these abstract notions of what design is and what it should be. Designing something you don't like at first. Don't be afraid. I mean, get unusual, get freaky. Design something maybe familiar or make it unfamiliar. And oftentimes really sexy, cool design is not that interesting. You have to really try things and experiment. Here's a really good example. We solved sleep apnea finally. Some of you might have sleep apnea. Yeah. Do you have one of these? CPAP. Okay, so you can't breathe when you have sleep apnea, so the one treatment is you wear this machine and it forces air into your nose. We started working with this company, and they had a feeling that by pulling the soft palate forward and the tongue forward, that it would open up air passages. That seemed so wrong to us. It didn't seem intuitive at all, and we really didn't, again, designing something you don't like at first to lead to prosperity. We developed this product, and it's a tiny little device, sits next to the bedside stand, it's silent. That's what it looks like. It's very quiet, it's very easy. It's just a little sensation of pull as it acquires a purchase inside your mouth, and then you don't feel it after that. This got FDA approval about a year ago, and it's now taking over the market. It's really extraordinary. That's just how innovation can occur when you just keep an open mind and use all the principles that I've been talking about and go to a place where you think, okay, I'm getting to wrap up, so I'm going to skip
Being in
that.
San Francisco.
Well, I'm going to skip that. It's really neat. Just believe me on that one, too. I'm going to skip over this project. It's a really neat new water heater in Mexico. It's changing how you heat water, and looks like that. Changing up your process. We worked a lot with Dell. We designed all these Dell machines, the PCs. We completely worked in a different way, and that led to the most successful line of Dell computers in that company's history, the Precision line. Some of you might have one. This last point, and I'm going to get off the stage here, is a little bit weird. Technology design is more like foam than form. Design has become more multidimensional, technical, porous, and dynamic. A product's design elements are like tightly packed foam bubbles, supporting one another, but always shifting and sometimes ephemeral. A product's digital presentation, its play factor, its meaning, and its relationship to a broader product network are all dynamically related and often changing. That was certainly the case with the Google Chromecast when we started designing that. They didn't quite know what form factor this thing should take on. And we started with a very hot chip that needed to be cooled off. And we looked at many different form factors, ultimately leading to the Chromecast, which is first of its kind for streaming media in your home. And this has been a huge success. This is Google's most successful hardware product to date. And we also worked on the packaging and the user interface when you turn on the television. That's a video. I'm going to skip that because I'm running out of time. Again, this is really what it was all about, trying to bring these halves together. I'm hoping that more of you talk about this topic. For me, this is very germane to what we do and why we should be doing this and why we should be having these kinds of discussions. We've got to get these two sides working better together and then expand the definition of what prosperity means, both from a client's aim or a corporate side and from a designer's side. That's why I call it the prosperity paradox. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure being here.